Hi there, welcome to the second part of this three-part series. On April 30th, I'm starting a new teach-along. And if you've never heard of a teach-along, let me tell you, it's really exciting because it's professional learning that's run week by week with an hour face-to-face session in each of those weeks. And you can either attend the face-to-face, or if you can't make it, and we know you have busy lives, you can watch the video replay. And a teach along is designed to be really valuable for you because you learn a little bit and you teach a little bit. And you learn a little bit and you teach a little bit. It's different from going to a whole day professional learning session where you say, oh, that'll be good one day. And then you walk away and you maybe implement some of it, and very often you don't. So it becomes a waste of time and a waste of money. And that's not what I want. I want to support you to be able to change your practice to support the kids in front of you. So on April 30th, I'm starting a new teach-along called Supporting Struggling Readers. And at the moment, I've got a series of 3 videos happening, and this is number 2. And in the last video, I talked about the things that we wish we'd known. If only we'd known, and we as in our profession, if only we'd known. And you can find the link to that video underneath this one. And so what a different world it would have been for so many children. But we do know those things now. And so we can make a difference to the children who we teach every day. And we can make a difference to the struggling readers in front of us by providing support and intervention that's evidence-based. Today's video is going to have a look at some of the different methods that we see in our schools for supporting our struggling readers. And I've helped a number of kids learn to read who are struggling, who've come to me in year 2 or 3 or older, right up to high school. And some of those children have a diagnosable issue like dyslexia. Many of them don't. They're what I call instructional casualties. And they just need the knowledge. But how do we support them? How do you as a teacher help those children get the best when they come to you and you're teaching year 2 or 3, or even year 1 students who can't blend a CVC? How do you help them? Because we know that the longer we leave it, the longer it takes and the harder it is for those children to make progress. And we don't want that for them. So I want to share with you through this series of 3 videos and the teach along to come. And look, if the teach along's not for you, that's fine. I want you to get value. I want you to learn things from these videos that help you to support kids and help you as a teacher to feel supported. So let's launch into today's video, and I'm just going to share my screen. So when we have a live session as part of the teach along, this is what happens. We use a Zoom platform and I share things with you, and we have an opportunity to talk and network. But for today, we're going to have a look at reading intervention that works. Now, I'm not here today to present you with the names of programs because we know that a program is just a tool. And there are lots of programs out there, and some of them are great and some of them are not great. But you as a teacher and as a school need to know how to evaluate the things in front of you, the tools in front of you, to say, is this going to work for our kids or not? So let's have a little look at the moment about what happens in our schools. There's 3 levels of intervention: individual, small group, and I've said large group, but that could be whole class. And you're thinking, well, if it's whole class, is it really intervention? Well, it can be. If you come from a disadvantaged area, if you have a number of students who are significantly behind in their reading development, what you deliver as your tier 1 instruction might actually fall under intervention, because you could have whole cohorts of kids, where 2 or 3 classes are all working at a year or 2 or even 3 years behind their year level. And I know that that happens because I've worked in those schools. I also know that all is not lost, that with some good quality practice, some collaborative practice, that we can make a massive difference to kids. And that's why I do what I do, to support you, to support them. So I've started today by looking at the large group. And so, as I said, if you have a whole bunch of kids who, are really behind where you would want them to be, your tier 1 practice and how you structure that can actually be a form of intervention. So I've seen it done really well. We're a whole cohort. So I have 4 rectangles here. Let's call those 4 year 1-2 classes, for example. And at a certain time of the day, all of the kids are streamed across the classes into groups that address the learning needs that they have for their level. And so the kids come out of the classes and they go into different groups. There are some advantages and some disadvantages of that, as you can imagine. One of the advantages is that every one of those children is getting a solid, it could be an hour, let's call it an hour, a solid hour of reading, phonics and reading instruction that's exactly pitched at their level. So that whole cohort is getting what they need. As a teacher, it means that you don't have to try and manage the needs of a whole bunch of different learners in front of you through some sort of group rotation type thing, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But addressing the whole cohort as a group, working collaboratively with your team teachers, means that you have then a whole cohort approach. It's not each teacher trying to do their own thing. And we know from John Hattie's work that collective efficacy is so very important. In order for this type of intervention to work, you need a whole school approach, or it might be a whole approach across, say, the early years or the upper primary. But you can't have every teacher doing their individual thing. Everyone needs to be working with the same approach. There needs to be coaching and support in place, common assessment, those sorts of things. But when we do this, we really empower kids, because we're saying to them, I see you, I'm giving you what you need. Let's put some learning in place and some teaching in place that supports you, then we can celebrate your success. One of the disadvantages to this approach is that it is possible for teachers to sort of lose touch with their students and where they're up to, because they're not actually teaching their own students for that hour. But there are other ways that you can keep in touch with your students. And in my experience, the benefits of being able to teach a whole group of kids, a large group, even at a class size, who are all at the same or very similar levels, far outweighs the disadvantages of moving classes. We need children to have the fundamentals. We need them to be reading at least 90 words per minute, using decoding and their phonics knowledge. We need them to know the full alphabetic code and be able to spell. And it's really hard as a classroom teacher to try and juggle all of the different learning needs all at once. So this approach I've seen work very well, but it's by no means the only approach available to us. We also have small group, and we're pretty familiar with this one, where they're often called group rotations. So you will divide your students into their leveled groups. And I really hope that if you're doing this, that you're actually targeting your grouping at a phonics and reading level, not a leveled reader approach, such as a benchmarking system or something like that. Because the whole thing around guided reading is a conversation for another time, and we're not going there today. But essentially, you group the children, and then either the students or the teacher moves between the groups, delivering short lessons to each group. The advantage is that you've got your own class, so it might feel a little bit more in control. The disadvantage is that by doing this, you cut down the amount of instructional time. In the previous example, where we have the large group, you've got a solid hour at least of instruction. In this approach, you have to cut that into 3. There's also a bit of a daily 5 model. Now, I have used this model. Every model I'm showing you I've used myself, and they have their pluses and their minuses, and you as a school make your decisions about what is best for your students in your school. I'm not here to advocate for any one of them over the other. I will say, though, that there's some interesting conversation happening at the moment around the benefit of the whole class versus the small group rotation. However, there are different ways of doing things at different times, and you as a teacher need to be able to be part of that decision making. But in a daily 5 model, we have the teacher moving a small group of students out and delivering a mini lesson. Then those students go back to do their own individual work, and other students move from doing their individual work over to the small group. So while we still maintain small groups, we're not expecting children to sit together. Largely, this is around the behavioural issues that we can see when we put kids in a group and ask them to manage themselves. And this will depend on the age, it will depend on your context, on so many factors. But certainly in the disadvantaged context in which I've taught, asking children to sit in a group and, get on and do what they need to hasn't always been that successful. So I switched to a daily 5 model, and that worked quite well, because of course we have children who are still off task. There's no magic answer to anything, but those kids were sort of off task by themselves rather than distracting everybody. There is also small group withdrawal, where another teacher may come and take the students. Sorry, skipping ahead. And so while you're teaching the majority of the students, someone, often a learning support teacher, will come and take the small group out. There's always a risk when somebody else is teaching that you're losing touch with what's happening. And this can often be the case where you have a learning support teacher, they take the kids out to work with them, and you may or may not be aware of what's actually happening with them. The next level is around the individual level. And so we can see here in this example, we have individual withdrawal, where the teacher's teaching the whole class, and then we have a second person teaching the individual one-to-one. This might be another teacher who's just, they might be on a part-time contract or something, and they come around and do some work. Could be a special education teacher, could be a teaching assistant, or we sometimes do this with parent helpers. My challenge around this kind of idea, particularly where you have a child who really needs one-to-one and we give them to a teaching assistant or a parent, is that that's the child with the highest needs, and we give them to the least qualified, least experienced person in the room. In saying that, investing time and training in teaching assistants is absolutely vital, because they can do a marvellous job. And here where I work full-time at the moment, I have seen teaching assistants be some of the strongest teachers within a good structured quality program. And we've seen assistants doing a wonderful job of being an integral part of the teaching. But for that, you need a whole school approach, you need explicit teaching, you need something that's laid out step by step so that there's no reliance on the person having to draw on their expertise, that they can utilise the program or the tool to do that. There's also another option for individual support. I've also seen this done very well as well. So you can see here that there's 2 blue dots. There's a larger dot and a smaller dot. So the larger dot is the classroom teacher giving some time, and it can't be huge swathes of time, obviously, but it could be 10 minutes a few times a week, where the teaching assistant or even the parent helper within the same room reads a story or leads the group in some sort of an activity, while the classroom teacher gives time to that highest needs student. Because in that situation, you as the teacher are the most qualified person with the greatest level of expertise, and that student needs you. That is not possible all of the time, but for some of the time, they need you. So that's utilising classroom time. That can be during silent reading time. It can be with individualised homework. So rather than giving the same blanket sheet, you can give that student things that are really going to impact them, like their phonics cards or their word reading, or something that's really going to support them in their reading growth. Story time, as I've mentioned, you could have the assistant or a parent helper read to the children. You're there providing the duty of care in the room, but you're giving the one-to-one support to the student. And this needs to be in short bursts. Now, I'm also going to suggest something that might be a little bit controversial. I'm going to suggest that there are times when your release time, your release from face-to-face teaching, in some places called DOT, in other places called RFF, can be a time where you grab that student for the 10 minutes. If you have an hour, grab the student for 10 minutes and do a little bit of work with them so that you can keep up with where that student is sitting. Even if that student is also receiving one-to-one or small group support from, say, a special ed teacher or learning support, that you need to keep up with the student. The teacher needs to retain ownership of the student's learning. There needs to be individual goals in place. Progress needs to be monitored. And there, I've said it already, the teacher has to have ownership, because the professional responsibility for supporting these students with reading difficulty, the ultimate responsibility sits with you. Effective intervention. The classroom teacher is connected and has ownership. We get the best results when it's the teacher who's driving what's happening. There needs to be a clear line of sight from the Tier 1 teaching to the intervention. Often we see that there might be an intervention program that sits completely separately to the main classroom teaching. That gives the child something completely different that they have to think about. It also makes it so that, very often we'll ask the classroom teacher what's happening when that child goes out with the learning support teacher, and the classroom teacher says, I'm really not sure, because there isn't the connection. So that connection is really important. And whatever happens needs to be evidence-based. So let's have a look at some of the criteria about what evidence-based instruction looks like. The same criteria for evidence-based intervention applies to the regular instruction and vice versa. So here we can see these 6 essential criteria for evidence-based instruction. Normally, the reading instruction intervention sits in phonemic awareness and phonics. When we do these 2 things really well, fluency will come. Vocabulary, unless the child has a particular language challenge that's being supported by a speech pathologist, generally vocabulary is taken care of in the regular classroom, but phonemic awareness and phonics are often worked on in the small group work or in the intervention. We need that intervention to be systematic so that it has a set sequence of teaching. We need it to be cumulative so that one set of skills and knowledge builds on another. It's not just random. We need opportunities for mastery, because so often our children who need extra support have compromised memories, working memory particularly. And so they need to have the opportunity to work on something until they've really, really got it before they're asked to do something else. And this work needs to be data-driven. No airy-fairy broad type of instruction where we do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and expose them to that. We need to be data-driven. And you can see here that here is a suggestion of a very simple method of data collection where you have one sheet, and then each time you assess the student, you use a different colour so that you can track the progress and have a data conversation with the student at the same time. We need to be using explicit gradual release of responsibility models. No inquiry, no let's play some fun games and they'll figure out what the patterns are. It needs to be, I have something to teach you. I'm going to build the field, going to model and deconstruct it for you. Joint construction, supported practice leading to independent practice. We have to use that method. It is an evidence-based method of teaching, and our kids who need the highest support need the most structured approach to this. We need to be giving children decodable text not predictable text. That number one rule around never putting things in front of children to read that they don't have the sounds or the high frequency word knowledge to read is really, really important. Decodable text for struggling readers. As I said in the last video, that might mean that that struggling reader needs decodable text all the way through to high school, and that's okay. That's not giving them impoverished literature, because we should be helping children have exposure to literature in our classroom as we read to them and we do our other English work in a text-based approach. But for the actual decoding, instruction and intervention, decodable texts are really vital. We need growth to not be measured by a benchmark assessment. We need a skills-based assessment to measuring growth. If you're going to do a reading assessment in terms of getting them to read a passage, you need some sort of norm referenced assessment rather than a benchmark assessment, because a benchmark assessment only tracks the child's growth through that program. It's not an objective measure of student growth. We need learning to be delivered in small, frequent chunks. Overwhelming children just makes them shut down and doesn't support their memory work challenges at all. So small chunks with small sets of goals that they're working towards. I haven't finished. There's quite a lot. But don't worry, because there's actually an infographic down below this video that you can download. You don't have to be taking notes. Sorry, I should have said that right at the start. We need the intervention to have opportunities for rehearsal and practice, because we know that our students who struggle often need many more repetitions. So potentially one of the ways you could structure this intervention is that you've noticed that a child isn't keeping up as well as others. They seem to forget things. Perhaps generally they're okay, they're still able to learn at the same level as their peers. But the intervention might be that you are going to give that student extra opportunity for rehearsal and practice in the specialised homework that you set, in the silent reading time where you or your assistant are going to work with them to give them extra exposure so that they're getting the multiple repetitions they need to commit this stuff into long-term memory. Focus on a small set of skills at a time, and I've mentioned about chunking and giving opportunities for mastery. Explicitly teach the full alphabetic code. About 50% of our students need a systematic, structured approach to learning to read, and they need to learn the full code. We can't just teach them the basic code and then give them spelling lists full of words that have the same sound and think they're going to infer or intuit what these sounds are. We have to explicitly teach the lot to all of them. For your more able learners, it will make them stronger in their learning. And for your more vulnerable learners, you are saving them from reading failure. We need intervention to continue until it's no longer needed. I hear of situations where, well, we deliver this program to year 1 and 2 and that's it. And so if the child hasn't acquired the skills and knowledge we want them to, by that time, well, unfortunately, there's no more work for you. And that's it. See you. Best of luck. Intervention needs to continue as long as it's needed. And remember, the intervention doesn't have to be with the special ed teacher. It can be the extra things that you as the classroom teacher do, like taking the student aside in quiet reading time, having a pencil case, and in the pencil case are sounds and words that they're practicing. It can be specialised homework. It can be grouping within the class. There's a whole lot of things. And as we collect evidence for NCCD, the nationally consistent collection of data on school students with a disability. Oof, that's a mouthful. All of these interventions and accommodations need to be recorded. We're actually obliged legally to provide the support that's needed for children to access the curriculum. And there's some very simple things that you can do to support struggling readers in your class. And there's that infographic that's available. You can just click on it below and download it. It has just about, or it has the main points. That would have been, you know, a meter long infographic otherwise, but you can always come back to this video and have a look. So In the next video, we're going to look at cognitive overload and how to prevent it. So you can see there this picture of this poor little face with its head exploding, and then we can see the child who is just celebrating the success that they've had. There's some very simple ways that you can support the cognitive load of students, and I'll run through those next time. If you have examples of some things that you've done in the classroom to support students, I'd really love it if you could share them below in the comments section, just to share with others, because when we work together as a profession, we are stronger. When we work together and collaborate, we get better results for kids because we have cognitive load as well. And my entire aim in the work that I do is to support you, so that you don't feel that you're alone, that you have things in manageable chunks. And that's why the Teach Along is presented in small snippets of information each week that you can take and teach, take and teach, take and teach, so that you can know that you are not by yourself. Ideally, you have a team at your school who you can draw on, but not everyone's in that position. Or maybe your team would like to participate together. So the really good thing about the Teach Along coming up is that because it's online, it will not be cancelled. There are no travel worries. There are no transmission of virus worries. Being online means that everything will be hunky-dory. That you go to a PD normally and you sit there for the day and you get a booklet. And I don't know about you, but I walk away with the booklet and 3 months later I get it out and I go, now what did that mean again? I can't remember. I need to hear it again. With a Teach Along you can, because you retain, even after the Teach Along is long finished, you retain access to all of the videos and materials. So you can pick it up and use it anytime you like. All of the sessions are recorded, so if you have meetings or you have young babies at home or whatever happens, you don't have to miss out. There is more information about the Teach Along coming, and I'll have more of that for you in the third video about cognitive load. If you'd like to be informed as more information comes out, please just fill out the comments box, the contact box, using the link below, which will forward your email to me, and I will give you further information as it's available. I'm not going to bombard your email box with spam. I absolutely promise. I hate that. But if you give me your email address so that I can let you know, I will forward you information about the Teach Along as it comes. Please don't hesitate to pop questions on the Facebook page or send me a message. We are all here to help each other. I look forward to seeing you in the next video as we talk about cognitive load. If you haven't subscribed to the website already, please do. And that's right down the bottom of this page. Pop your email address in there and then you can find out when further blog posts are published. I hope that you have a fantastic next couple of days. All the best. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.